of his fans. What? Pardon me?
Is that World War I?
Oh, World War I, yes, absolutely. And Bert looked at me. There was no division between us, and he said, I know of the polar bears. He said, I know all about the polar bears. And then he said, why don't you come next week to my house, and I'll have my mother's crystal set out for you. I didn't know what a crystal set was, but it was a creamer and sugar, and you do know what a crystal set is. And so we were friends. We did it. And the next week, I brought over cinnamon rolls, which was always the best thing to do. Okay, let's see, we can. I brought over cinnamon rolls, and we sat at his mother's table. It was a little 1920s bungalow right next to where Kirk's Fishing is right now. And it was neat and tidy as a pin, and it was just Bert and just me and his mother's crystal set, sat on this decorative yellow 1930s tablecloth. And the cuckoo clock was humming every 15 minutes. I thought that completes the picture. And it was toasty and warm. And I looked over to the stove, and he said, Kalamazoo, direct to you. And I just looked up what that meant a few days ago, and it was Kalamazoo store that sold the best stoves in that vintage. Anyway, he had his table set sort of like this, but he wasn't jury-rigged like I am. And he had stacks of wonderful photo albums on it. And he said, well, shall we get started? So we had our coffee, we had our cream from his mother's crystal set. The cuckoo clock went off, and he said, my dad, Fred McLaren, came from Lyons to the east side of Rocky Mountain National Park in the 20s, and he was one of the first rangers. And this is Fred McLaren from his dad's photo albums. He was on the west side. He was moved over in 1922 as the chief ranger of Shadow Mountain Rec Center. And he was actually one of the first rangers in Rocky Mountain National Park. And I was surprised. Bert said, I think there were only about 5 rangers. Is this correct, Jim? You weren't here then, but back in the 20s. And he said they had to wear so many hats. My dad had to wear so many hats. He greeted guests. He pulled guests out of snow. He made saves. He got them on the right trails, and he even caught 2 bandits. And then he said, you know, back then, Trail Ridge wasn't even opened. It was just Fall River Road. And he said, my dad used to say that he would predict sometime when the park would probably see almost 100 guests a day. And my son was at one of the meetings, and Ryan, who always has a quick repartee, said, yeah, how about 1 million, 1.3 million a season? And Bert's father would have been aghast. And this to me is amazing. This is a 1907 postcard, and Bert's mother had to remarry when the dad disappeared. It's a long story. Bert's dad's father did not come back from Arizona, and she remarried a Fred Hornbaker. And they drove, if you can believe this, in the 1907 stagecoaches to Grand Lake. And then Bert said, and my dad, when he was 16, got to drive the stagecoach too. And so he said they were some stagecoach drivers back then. That's probably how the Wild West got its name. And they would deliver cartons up to the gold mining areas. They came into Grand Lake. It's just so hard to believe that just a few hands, arm's length goes back to the stagecoach days in Grand Lake. And then he said, now remember, Bert said to me, now write this down, the train didn't come to Granby until 1905. Did you know that? And he said, so you either rode the stage, you had horses and mules, or you took a long, long, long walk. And he said, and that's coming from another angle. He said, at first my parents lived very frugally. This is a tent camp. And when they were on the east side, they lived in this in the summer. They were married in 1919, Bert's parents were. And life was pretty frugal and pretty simple back then. This was skiing at its height, not quite Winter Park style. And then this is a picture, and I don't have many, of Iva, Bert's mother. And Bert's mother was meticulous. She also had 6 children in less than 9 years. They ended up moving to the Pole Creek Ranger Station over on the west side, but she kept a tidy household. And the next is my favorite picture because it conjures up lots of thoughts. This is little Bert. Bert was a baby. And he said, my mom was always digging out all of my 5 older brothers and sisters out of the snow. So she got little skis, put paraffin wax on the bottom of them, and had me ski and learn to walk in the house. And I guess I polished her hallway floors. And this was Bert's sort of self-deprecating humor, an incredible, thought. And I had to laugh because inside, my little 2-year-old, Ryan, who became a ski coach eventually, when he was 2, didn't talk very much, but he knew one word, and it was ski. And so for $6.95, we bought him his first pair of skis when he was 2 at Dixville Notch, New Hampshire. And so I understood Bert's absolute love of snow at this point. And the Rangers, Fred McLaren's friends, the Rangers, built a little log cabin playhouse. That's Bert on the left and his sister. And he said, I love living at the Ranger Station. What's there not to love? Snow, water, fresh air, and friends. And on the left, we have Bert. He was always fond of and exposed to wonderful animals. And on the right, we have my son, who would have fit right in to his family. And this is the grouping of the McLaren kids, all 6 of them. And notice that Fred McLaren's photos do not have a formal picture where they're all sitting, propped up on a chair. They're all outside. They're always having fun. And I love the fact that the girls have party shoes on in the snow. And Bert's one of his favorite animals was the family pig. And, oh, this one I love. Bert's said, well, back in 2 years, and it was in the, I think it was 39 and 44, we had so much snow that even my dad, who was the expert of plowing out Fall River Road, couldn't plow us out. So he said we spent half the winter just making snow and ice animals. And they couldn't have been happier. I think that one's a horse. And this again is the gist of the McLaren household. Skis, snowshoes, anything to do with snow.
Where is that house?
Does anyone know where the old Shadow Mountain Ranger Station was? Do you, Jim?
No, I don't.
It was in the park, and right now you're not allowed to live on park premises, is that correct? So it was in the park, and we can look that up easily enough. This is Bert mining for gold. Again, what an idyllic life. Okay. And his father took him on many missions to learn to ride. This was Bert's favorite horse, Red. And it was kind of interesting because later, when Bert was growing, he was a ranger in Yellowstone National Park. He logged in 5,000 hours of riding on horseback, watching all of the animals, trying to figure out what to do with the surplus of elk. And then when he got married, the park was so impressed with Bert's riding skills, they got his wife a horse and a mule, so she too could ride with him. And this to me sort of tells what's coming forth in Bert. It's sort of a serious note. Okay, he did a lot of wonderful things in the wilderness, but he was thoughtful. He loved his history. He loved figuring out solutions to problems, and he was on a roll. And his teacher was Patience Cairns Kemp. And isn't this amazing? And she said, when we interviewed her, I taught every grade except kindergarten because they were saving up all of their energy for first grade. And she knew, she said, some of them rode their horses to school, and they skied day in, day out. They skied before school, they skied after school. If they gobbled down their lunch, they could ski during lunch break. And there they are, the little mission of Grand Lake school kids. His two sisters are, I believe, on the far left in this picture. And that was the dream of Grand Lake children, to be outside and utilize every minute of being in that snow. And this one I enjoy. They're wearing spring party dresses. And what do we have to the right? We have skis, because somewhere, somehow, there could be some snow. And this is the what's now the sledding hill, and this used to be the ski jump real premier ski jump area, but the skiing area where people could put on races and learn to ski. And this picture right to the left is the parking lot. And do you know where the sledding hill is right now? It's right by Trinity Church. And so this is the way it was back in the 30s. And it was used every moment of the day and that night too.
Hold the microphone real close.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay. And do I have to keep pressing the button? Oh, okay. Oh, that's helpful. And so the team, Bert's friends, all started being enamored with ski jumping. And this was one of the original beginner jumps, and well applauded by everybody in town. And guess what? There were winter carnivals back then. In fact, we found winter carnivals in the early 1900s. And unfortunately, the paper has disintegrated a bit, but this is one of the first winter carnival advertisements in the Denver Post. I'm not sure. Rocky Mountain News, okay.
Wait, there was snow in the winter in Grand Lake?
Believe it or not, yes. Okay. And they did cross-country skiing, and here Bert is honing up for racing. Even though he was a serious young man, he loved to race. And there we go. This is our first ski team from Grand Lake. And the people all got together and got money to have orange striped uniforms for them, and they thought they were pretty terrific. And they were. And they were pretty great ski jumpers. And in the next one, oops, can you go back? Okay, Bert and his friends went to Steamboat to compete in the Junior Olympics, or the Junior Ski Jumping Contest, the Nationals. Bert had hurt 2 of his ankles. He taped them up. He went jumping off of the almost Olympic size jump and came in 10th in the nation as a young man. And he said, you know what? We were pretty good in our orange uniforms. He said, we came in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th in the nation, all from the little community of Grand Lake.
That's a picture of Hot Sulphur Springs, isn't it?
That could be Hot Sulphur, but this was in Steamboat that he won the 10th position. They practiced in Hot Sulphur. And Steamboat was quite an inspiration for Little Grand Lake. This picture on the left I got, it's one of the first ski touring pictures from the 1927 in Steamboat. And Grand Lake really thought this was fun. And these are Bert's 2 sisters, very soon thereafter, forming some acts similar to ski touring behind horses. Yeah, and this is a great one, which you all saw. Wasn't it happy last week? Well, it was happy for a few days. But it was very, there was tons of snow, didn't have to be imported, and right in town.
And so that's the mushroom shot, right? Is that right? I think so. The Berkshire Hills.
Yes, okay. That was built in around the 1890s and became the oldest, right now it's the oldest standing building that was a commercial building, the Howelsons. And he liked fishing, so he had fishing bait. He had all sorts of things in that little store. Plus, he had our post office for many years. And then what I loved is on Friday nights, they had the fiddler come in. And he would fiddle, and they would all go up to the second floor of this building and square dance. And come into the mushroom shop, you'll see the original flooring. And it squeaks every time you walk 2 feet. And it seemed like people just would get behind their horse and get to work. I don't think that's a contest of any form. It's just sort of taxi. And this isn't a picture of Bert, but Bert, when he was 4 or 5, did this. And his mother was quite frantic and told them exactly how fast they could go with her good son behind it. And these are out maybe in the Kawanichi, Winding River area, just wherever they could go with lots of expansive snow and happiness. Oh, now, Ellen, you said this was the school sled,
Yes.
but it might have been Fred Maker's too, because he had sleds like this, and Bert remembered, and we wrote down, that Fred Maker had a stove inside his sled. So when it was cold and raw, you could always go inside the sled. Simple, fun times. And I think this is, the pine tree, that's Fred Maker's sled for sure. Isn't that amazing? And Ellen, they used to drive to school, you said, in these? You said they used to go to school in the sleds?
It's called the school sled.
Okay, the school sled. Aren't these great photos? These are all from Bert's father's carefully calculated albums. And we spent hours and hours and hours. I could go on, and I won't, for days. Okay. And, oh, this is fun. These are 2 of Bert's sisters. And this is called the Sunrise Challenge. They would all go up to the top of Rocky. They would ski down, and then they'd go back up again. And then in the afternoon, they would go into Grand Lake water skiing. So it was a 12-hour challenge in outfits like this. Oh, now this was fun. Bert talked a lot, and believe me, I could go on but I won't, about going with his father in the 1930s, 38, to do snow counts. And they always had about 4 feet of snow, at least, don't we wish? And they would do something, they had a tube, and they would collect the snow, and on the outside of the tube were rungs to say how many inches there were. Then they would take this, and his dad would weigh it, compact it, to see what the water content in the snow was. And this was exceedingly important because they wanted the farmers and the ranchers to know what their spring season was going to bring as far as water. Right now, I think Bert's father would have been appalled because Bert said we had a record up near the top, Irene Lake, where we had 10 feet of snow counted. He said, but really, snow is a delicate mission to count, the great historian. He said, we shouldn't have been up there because there were snowdrifts. We should have been in a central area where there were no snowdrifts. He was so wonderfully exacting, charming, and right on target. And that's what our area looked like back in the 30s. Probably or last year, right? And right around this area, and it was kind of interesting, Bert's dad got a track of of what he called a mountain buffalo. It was a carcass of a mountain buffalo, the skeleton. He said, we never had known that we had buffalo here, he said. And then Bert reflected and he said, well, you've heard of Gore Canyon, and how they caught and trapped so many animals that they killed almost 1,000 buffalo in the 1800s near Gore Canyon. And he said, but we had never found one before in Rocky Mountain National Park. And I could go on for about 32 pages of how his thoughts for the wildlife in our county was and were. He said, elk and moose are not native to our areas. They were brought in, and I have all the statistics if someone later wants to know. And they survived very well, particularly the moose, which loved all of the wet environment over by Kawanichi Valley. And he said, and they took off. And Kawanichi became almost the star area for moose. But he said, and this was in the 90s when I was talking to him, we're going to have some problems. He said, because they eat 70 pounds of foliage a day. And it's all of the things that are ripe and love to live in Kawanichi, which was hurting the beaver. And he projected we were in for some real serious thoughts about what to do with all of the elk and all of the moose were transplanted here. And that should be another form of discussion because it was absolutely insightful. And this was back in the 90s, but he had done a lot of work in Yellowstone, working with animals, surplus elk and surplus animals in Yellowstone and what they did to try to alleviate the problem. Okay, this one is before Bert was born. It's his two brothers, and do you know where they are? They're at the top of Berthoud. And Berthoud had been a sort of construction in progress for a long time. And finally, someone from the east side helped fund so that they could get Berthoud up over to Cousins Ranch. But this is
Trailridge or Berthoud Pass?
Berthoud Pass. This is Berthoud Pass. And very quickly, Bert, do you know where we are here? Lulu City. Bert took us through, and we all walked and went on past and with him and on our own. This was Lulu City, which was supposedly a gold mining treasure off of the Colorado River trailhead. And it was plated for many blocks with hotels, saloons, houses, and then gold never really panned out. And a lot of intruders came with metal detectors and started ripping the little town down. Have any of you ever been up there?
Yes.
Okay, you know there's not much up there. It's quiet with wildflowers, the stream running through. It's hard to believe that there was once a town that was just so, now this is some of the ravages of the town. But guess what? There was a bear trap, right? And no one can find the bear trap left. Bert told us where it was. So I'll tell you later, but not. Okay? And this was one of Bert's favorite things to do. He loved Grand Lake. This is Grand Lake in the 30s. This is where the sagebrush is now. It was Zick's. It was Zick's everything. It was a hotel. It was a bakery. It was a store. It was everything right on the corner. And Bert spent probably 2 months taking us to every single building in the town, telling us the whole history of who owned it, preceding them, and what happened to it. And so this is the 1930s Grand Lake, Colorado. And the road was not paved, and it was so dusty that the women's club got together and funded money to put some kind of a sealant on the dust so that you wouldn't be overwhelmed by dust flowing off of Grand Ave. And this is, Bert said, you know, Pinecone Inn, it was great. Entertainment was pretty cheap and very simple back then. He said it was 10 cents a dance, but if you were a good dancer, which Bert was, they would hand you a ticket. You would go out and do some of the fast dances. Sometimes they had an all-women's band, and you would go back and they would give you back your ticket. So you could dance all night for 10 cents a dance. This is actually late 40s, early 50s. And this picture is of Bert's 2 brothers taking off for the 1942 wars. And Bert was 12, and he said, I would have done anything to go to the 10th Mountain Army Division with him, but I was just too young. Poignant.
Looks like Shasta.
It does look like Shasta, right at the front door of the shop. And Bert loved the simplicity of living outside. I'm not talking much about what he did in Yellowstone or what he did in, he went to the Korean War for 2 years, but he came back, and this is my favorite picture of Bert. This was his first job on the west side, and guess where it is? It's the fire tower. The historic fire tower. And doesn't he look just like King of the Mountain up here? And he was. Okay, we better get some statistics. He said that it was the Shadow Mountain Lookout. It was built in 1932. And I have just found out today, which I passed out, that it's on the National Historic Register. It is the only fire tower that is now stone-built. There are only 12 other towers in Colorado, and it is the only one that is really in pretty darn good shape. He gave statistics. He said, at first it was built of lodgepole pine, then later rebuilt as a solid rock building, 3 stories high, 13 feet square, at elevation of and this is Bert's particular knowledge, of 9,923 feet. The two of us lived on the top floor with the wonderful log-trimmed windows. We each had binoculars. There were 2 cots, a little desk, a telephone, a fire finder, large map, and a fire spotting instrument. I loved it, except once, when they were burning slash on Lake Granby, and they forgot to tell me. So I called in this potential disaster to the powers that be, and you never combine a greenhorn and a controlled fire. They're just not too compatible. So Bert reflected in the 1990s, and it's still standing, and it's the park's last lookout. It's valuable as a secondary source, and he said back in the 1990s to me, please watch out for me. It's a valid source. That's why you all have these sheets tonight. I did watch out for him. Well, we have a little skit to put together because my son, Ryan, and Bert became fast friends. They were 55 years apart. And they were 2 peas in the pod, and my daughter, who is Ryan's closest relative, is going to play Ryan, come on. And Jody is about a foot taller, but he's going to play Bert.
That's accurate.
And this is verbatim that we recovered. It tells you how a young person would excitedly react to a ranger and how a ranger would react to them.
Bert, I gotta ask, how long did it take you to race from the lake to the fire tower?
Well, I go up the front of the mountain in about 45 minutes and then come down in 10 to 12 minutes.
Mom, are you gonna say your part? No? Okay. You know,
Oh, well, it took me how many hours to get up there? I think I interjected.
just under 3.
Just under 3 hours for me to climb the same.
Oh, sure.
You know, Thomas, who works for the Rapids and rescued the young boy who fell in the falls, Adams Falls, well, he and I like to hike to the tower at 2 a.m. after work or the lariat. We love it under the moonlight, absolutely beautiful and a lot safer than my adventure falling down Fair Glacier near Grand Lake.
So how did you manage to do that?
Not very well. You know that 45-degree angle you were talking about on the ski jump? Well, I slid down several hundred yards at an angle and landed in a 20-foot crevasse.
I remember that.
Did you have an ice axe?
Yeah, but it was too steep.
Crampons?
No, but hefty hiking boots.
Did you know how to make a self-arrest?
Well, of course, yes.
Well, good. But the caress kind of messed up things a bit for you. You know, I don't think I ever had a save on the glaciers.
Gravity usually wins, but luckily not this time.
Well, that's a good thing.
And winding up, we have much more to talk about, but I won't. This is in honor of Ann and Jim, who helped do all of the recording, the transcribing. We had hundreds of pages that we would hand transcribe, and Jim always baked us fresh bread. And if it was really snowing outside, I got to sleep over in their guest room, and they put moose flannel sheets on for me. They were wonderful. And this comes from my son, who now is a teaching fellow over in Norway and in Europe. And he wanted to honor Bert with this. This is Ryan just 2 weeks ago skiing down. And if you look at it carefully, some things haven't changed. He's skiing on one ski because the other one is lost. Okay. And this is terrific. Brian was inspired by Bert and all of the children in the snow. This again was about probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, where they took out maybe 50 kids, little kids, to the Arctic area of Norway, cross-country skiing in minus 20 degrees with not a complaint in the world, and just honoring the snow and the beautiful wilderness. Well, we were lucky enough. Bert was not very well towards the end of last century, and we, just leave this on. This is kind of a fun one. And we pumped out as much of the story, and we had like 80 pages of direct quotes, and I returned all of his photos in a wonderful professional Kodak orange box, and he was in his bedroom, and he was so pleased to get this story out. I cannot begin to tell you how excited he was to share his absolute wonder of Grand Lake and all of the adventures in Grand Lake, and that was the last that I ever saw of him.